love it when you have tech issues. It's so exciting. That is the beauty of online business, right? Um, Tanya Patxot here. I am the founder of the Genesis Network, and I run the Igniting Clarity show. And I have Vikki here with me. I I met her in a podcasting group, and she really blessed me because when I met her, she's just so like, I don't give a damn, and I love it. When you hear from her and she explains and introduces herself, you're gonna hear exactly what I mean by it. But it's so beautiful because she stepped into her identity, and there's so much you can learn whether you agree or disagree. And so, I love having her on the show. We're going to have a lot of fun igniting clarity discussions. So, Vikki, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here. So, I am a coach. I specialize in helping people get shit done. And underneath that comes like, how do you manage anxiety? How do you manage perfectionism? How do you manage people pleasing and our fear of failure? And really, and maybe we'll get into this a bit later, but my own story was one of, waking up with panic attacks, going out there and doing what everyone does and speaking to Dr. Google and getting like exploded with all this like confusing misinformation that was completely disempowering and telling me that there was something wrong with me and I was broken and I needed to be fixed. And as I started to like go about, using my life coaching, which is what I was already doing, and evolution and biology and all of this stuff, I was really amazed at the conversations that I was having with people where they'd been told from when they were like 10 years old that there was something wrong with them. Basically, I think mental health is, and our brains and our procrastination is not a one size fits all. And I'm coming out here as like a different voice that teaches people how to manage their brain and really stop judging themselves and criticizing themselves and understand a little bit like the basic science of why we are how we are so we can spend more time solving it and less time judging it. And
I,
yeah, I have a podcast myself. I'm sure this is what you meant when you said people might love it or hate it. It's called Fuck Anxiety and Get Shit Done.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes I think, those, everybody knows I'm a believer, and a lot of times I will follow individuals that might not have the same belief system, but it's like they still, God gives gifts without repentance, so he's not, the beautiful gifts that individuals have and how they express that. We can't judge that. There's so much that could be learned regardless of whether we have the same belief system or not. And so that's what I meant by that. It's like some people are like, I'm not going to serve this type of client. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, man, you're missing out. You're missing out. You don't understand the influence that you can have. You don't understand their story. And one thing that you said was that somebody younger, when somebody had told somebody even at age 8, 10, whatever, that they had issues or that they were not good enough or that, whatever that was told. And I heard this thing yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and it said, she said, you weren't born this way. There was a belief system, something that was set inside of you. And something that you said when we were talking in private, you said you woke up with anxieties, you did all that. But what was so interesting is that you were successful in the world's eyes. You were making bank. You were having clients. You accelerated beyond, and you were still suffering from anxiety and past issues. Because I'm a big proponent of inner healing, especially for entrepreneurs. Can you talk more about that part?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually see this a lot with my clients. Why does anxiety exist? We don't really speak about this. And what actually is anxiety? Essentially, our brain's one job is to keep us alive, and that means to keep us safe. That means, don't get exposure, don't don't get exposed to potential failure or rejection. Like really playing small and staying stuck is like what is our brain's happy zone. And actually a lot of my clients come to me because they are highly ambitious and high performing, which means they are going against their brain's programming. Every time we want to create something, every time we want to have an impact, if we want to shift the world in any way, we want to create a movement, we want to inspire people into action, whatever it is, especially if you're going against something that's like been a mainstream way of solving a problem, then you are going to experience more anxiety. That's anxiety's job, is to come up and be like, hey, we're going into danger. We're probably going to die. But stop work. And it's like, remember what actually happens with anxiety is, hormones are able to run faster, longer, feel less pain, see more, and have heightened senses. Like all things that were highly useful when the danger was, about being eaten by a lion. And now we have those same hormones released and those same physical reactions to an email or a public speaking opportunity or launching a podcast, and it's not so useful anymore. So just because our brains have developed with this skill of survival, and now our world has moved so quickly into like the technological era where we really don't need those skills anymore, doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It actually makes complete sense evolutionarily speaking. We're just never taught that side of it.
No, and I agree, because through my studies about the brain and so on and so forth, your brain can't tell the difference. Your brain can't tell the difference if it's a lion or if it's a podcast. I'm going live or I'm being chased by a lion. Like, it's like, oh, well, they all sound the same to me. So your brain just naturally will start to do that. And so I love it, because when you step into the business world, when you step into something new in life and in business, you are, like what you said, you're going against the grain, you're going against your natural programming. And so you have to, and everybody is different, but you have to identify and soothe that anxiety, soothe that part of your brain that says, no, I'm not in danger. I'm not in danger. It's not a lion. We got this.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I always say we're never taught to question our brain. We just walk around believing everything it tells us. It's like, you can't do this. You're like, guess I can't do it. Right? Like, I always think of, I'm going to mess up his name, but there was a runner, I don't even know what decade it was, and it used to be that you could run the 100 meters in like 7 point something seconds. No, I'm getting the whole thing wrong. Anyway, there was a runner he broke it wasn't done, the mile wasn't done in less than 10 seconds or whatever it was. I'm ruining the whole thing. Yeah, okay. But once one person broke the record, then like within a few months, I think it was Roger Bannister, but I might be completely wrong. But within a few months, loads of people beat the record. So it's like, once he created that belief of like, I can run in less than 10 seconds, then more people did it. So it's like, you either have to believe it to see it or see it to believe it. Most of us wait to see that we can do something in order to do it. And when we're doing that, we're listening to our anxiety and reinforcing the fact that we can't do something. And we have to be willing to go out and fail. But to our brain, failure equals death. You have to go against that programming. And this is the whole system and why it doesn't serve us, especially if we're ambitious, especially if we want to have an impact, especially if we're looking at something entrepreneurial or doing something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, I like that, because again, through studies, years ago, I learned that your brain is wired to ask questions or to answer questions. So what happens is, if you say, I can't do this, your brain will naturally come and validate all the reasons why you can't. But if you say, how can I do this? Your brain will naturally validate all the reasons and bring up all the ideas and creative aspects of how you can. So if you just say, I don't have the money to do this, your brain's going to be like, yeah, you're right. You got this bill, you got that bill, you can't do this, you can't do that. But if you say, well, how can I get the money? Your brain's like, oh, well, you could go do this, you can go do this, you can go. And so it's really a mental thing. It's really how we start to transition and value our brain. Isn't it amazing how we don't really value the one thing that that really makes us us and how we function. Like I don't even know how to explain it, right? Maybe you could do better, but it's kind of like we negate a lot of the things and how our brain functions. We study business. We study, like, I remember studying for so long business and all this other stuff, but I didn't study marriage. I didn't study parenting. I didn't study how my brain worked. Like, isn't that
Right.
interesting? You study like the craft, but then you're just like, oh wow, look at all the other things.
Completely. It's like we have this crazy powerful tool and we just don't know how to use it. And because we don't know how to use it, we end up with this dissonance of, well, I said I was going to do X today and now I've not done it. And that means I'm a bad person. Instead of like, why didn't I do it? What was my brain telling me? Was it telling me that I was going to fail, or that no one was going to listen anyway, or that I was going to embarrass myself, or that other people were going to judge me? So instead we spin into like, I'm a terrible person, and it stops us from solving the root thing. And I think it's completely true. Like, we're never taught how to use our brain. It's just wild. Like the things I've learned in the past 4 years since coaching, I'm like, I'm actually offended that I had to learn like pH tables and all this stuff and chemistry, all this like useless stuff. And I never once got taught that, like, hey, your brain is wired to be lazy. That's one of the things I teach my clients, right? There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is literally wired to conserve energy. That's like something, it thinks it's saving you. It thinks it's doing a really clever thing. Like, there's a reason why Netflix is such a big company. There's a reason why, some of these companies are doing so well, because they feed our primitive brain exactly what it wants. It's not because you are the only person in the world that had something in your schedule and then ended up watching Netflix. That's actually very common. That's how our brain, like, these companies are built for our brains.
You know what's so funny? I'm laughing because you are so right that we're out there in business, let's just say. We're studying um, how to know your market, how to know your person, what are they thinking, what are their pain points, all that. And we don't think that Netflix does the same thing. We don't think that Facebook does the same thing. It's kind of like, hey, wake up, right? And I
Right.
get it. I have these days, like I got into this new show, Lenox Hill, where it's about like this hospital and they do a lot of brain surgery and things like that. It's really interesting. And I loved The Prophet. Oh my gosh. Marcus Lemonis, he taught me so much when it comes down to looking at your business, your financials, your how, and stewarding over stuff. Man, I binged watched, okay,
Right.
season after season.
Right.
Um, I know I'm a nerd, you would think I would watch like Avengers or something, but, um, I have that too, but believe it or not, I almost schedule it. I'm like, all right,
Oh,
you know what? Monday through Friday, this is what it is. This is what I'm focused on. I'm going to work up until this amount. And there'll be times that I don't finish things, but it was purposely done. It was like, you know what? I put it in my schedule, but in reality, this is really not a priority. This is like a luxury, like, changing some copy or doing some stuff. That's nitpicking and going through something. No, I rather do a live, that type of stuff. Um, so I love it. So tell me, you're laying there, you're in this place of anxiety, you're waking up, you have sweats, you're successful by the world standards. What happens next?
I mean, I didn't even know it was anxiety at the time, right? Like, I was completely oblivious. I would just wake up with my heart pounding, sweats, like you said, and a million thoughts in my head, and really just feeling strange. Like, I would wake up so alert. It was bananas. I was like, oh, I'm a morning person now.
Oh,
And
it only took anxiety.
right. And my partner, who's now my husband, was the one that was like, I don't think it's normal how you wake up. And then I spoke to a friend, and she was the one that said it sounds like anxiety. And what was interesting was I was already working as a life coach, and people had come to me and asked for help with anxiety. And I'd like believed all the mainstream stuff that I'd read. And I was like, you don't need a coach. You need like a doctor. Like, nah, no way. Like, I can't help you. Like, literally, that was where I was. Then obviously this happened to me, and I knew that like it was happening in the morning. I was waking up like this, and then as the day went on, I was okay. because I didn't get exposed to like anyone else's opinion on what was happening to me. So there was no one telling me that there was something wrong and all of this stuff. So by the time I actually went to Dr. Google and was reading this information, things like, anxiety is a feeling of worry, overwhelm, and worry, apprehension, and overwhelm, I was like, that doesn't tell me anything. That's like, what's the difference between worry and anxiety? Why do we even use the word anxiety? Useless. And another thing that I read that stood out to me was 1 in 5 American adults will suffer from an anxiety disorder. And I read that sentence, and my background was economics and finance, statistics. And I was like, 1 in 5 of a sample size of like over 100 million people is definitely not a disorder, definitely a trend, right? Like, this has to be explainable through science. And that's how I ended up going down the evolutionary biology route and looking into why it exists. And really applying a combination of like life coaching tools, understanding the science, and practical applications to feel in control. I guess, like, obviously now I'm so glad it happened because of like the tools that I was able to build and how I'm able to help people now. But it even took me time. Like, even now, I'm not afraid of anxiety now. Like, I very rarely get it. But the last time was last June. I had a panic attack, and it was just such a completely different experience to anything I'd had before, because I went through it thinking like, oh, I know what's happening. I know why it's happening. I know what I need to do to like be with it, not get rid of it, be with it. And just that in itself is a game changer. What happens is we experience anxiety, and anxiety is there, remember, to think like if something's wrong with us, if our brain thinks we're going to die, releases the hormones so we can run from the lions. Now, once we have the anxiety, if we then start thinking, oh no, I'm going to die, or there's something wrong with me, we're creating more anxiety. So we end up in this loop, and it just like compounds and gets bigger and bigger and bigger of like, this is wrong with me, fighting it, I need to stop. And like at some point, you just like completely burn yourself out versus like, oh, I'm going to allow this to be here. And actually nothing's gone wrong with me. I know exactly why it's happening and what's happening. And even if the actual experience of it is uncomfortable, we're 100% going to survive it, right? Heart rating, heat. I have people tell me they feel very dizzy, or some people throw up, tingles up and down the arms, like whatever the effects are for you, you actually aren't going to die. Right? You just need to remind that. Your brain thinks you are because it thinks that a lion's chasing you. You need to be like, it's okay. I can sit here and experience like the physical sensations. Once I went through that experience myself and started to see the impact of the work that I was doing, I was like, obviously, I need to get this out there. And then as I started coaching people, I wanted to get it out there more and more, which is why I launched the podcast. And like, I mean, I hear from people all over the world how the podcast, like the first 10 episodes were better than 3 years of therapy, or, like things like it. Someone said to me, it's literally changed the biology of my brain, because it's like, we're just not taught this simple information. Like, it's not complicated. It's not complex. Like, our brains are way more able to like take in information than we think they are. But when we're given this like one tunnel opinion that basically is there's something wrong with us, then we feel very disempowered to do anything about it. And the problem isn't even the anxiety, it's feeling in control. And when we feel out of control, then we're not able to help ourselves.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is that we're not always going to be in control of everything, but we have to be okay with that. There's going to be things that we can control and take responsibility. And then there's certain things that's like, all right, well, it's out of my control. I'm okay with it. Whatever happens, happens, and I'm just going to flow with it and know that I could pick up and address it or however. So I do want to do a part 2, because I want to talk. I know when I have felt, last year I had like my first anxiety attacks. And I remember being even at like a Walmart because we were traveling. And I remember being with my kids, and it was so scary because I literally had a panic. It was so bad. And I'm trying to hide it from my kids so they don't freak out. And I'm trying to maintain control. And I start shaking, and the lady looks at me at the register, and she obviously sees and she recognizes I'm having a panic attack, because all of a sudden I'm talking to her regularly and I shifted. So she starts talking to me. Oh yeah, and you're visiting, and I was like, thank you so much, because she helped me get down. because I was trying to block it. So, I want to embrace that aspect because it is real, and a lot more go through it, but there's like this shame with it as well, that they don't get up like you do and just say, screw it, I'm going to go research it. I'm going to go figure it out. And then start adapting it into their life, understanding that that might be what God has you going to be helping other people with. Like that triggered something in you. So let's go into part two. Go ahead and tell us your podcast or your website, and then we'll talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, so my website, you can go to vikkilouise.com. It's VIKKILOUISE. And I have a fuck anxiety guide that you can get at vikkilouise.com/guide. And it's just like, it's literally like a paragraph on the science, everything you need to know and nothing more. And then a worksheet like with questions to ask when you are experiencing the anxiety, if you need like that woman to like pull yourself out of it, and how to become the watcher of it instead of the experiencer of it. And then a few questions to ask afterwards, be able to proactively be prepared for next time. And these are the exact questions that I used myself, that changed everything. And the podcast is F*CK, so that's fuck anxiety, and get SH*T done. And again, it's like short 10-15 minute episodes every single week, teaching one concept that you can actually apply, because I think there's a lot of that amazing self-help books and amazing podcasts and amazing lectures and webinars and all these things, but really we can consume or we can apply, and we need to do a little bit less of the consuming and a little bit more of the application, because again, a lot of people will come to me and say, well, I've tried everything and it's not working. But we're not supposed to be experts in managing our mental health or managing our schedules, because like you said, we're never taught it. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It's just like anything else. Like if I wanted to learn how to make homemade pasta, I wouldn't just be like, I'm just gonna go to the shop and see what I pick up. I would like speak to someone, or maybe Google, I don't know. But I wouldn't just read a book and then host people 20 times. I would probably practice and learn and like and actually apply what I'm learning. So it's the same thing.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. I like the consume and apply. Huge. So we'll be back. Tanya Patxot with the Genesis Network on the Igniting Clarity Show.